Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning, and instead of reaching for cereal or coffee, you do nothing. You let the hunger sit. You go through your morning, your afternoon, the entire stretch of your day with nothing but water. And then, sometime in the evening, you finally sit down and eat one meal. That's it. One meal for the entire day. Now, most people reading that would immediately feel uneasy, maybe even a little afraid, because we have been conditioned, deeply and thoroughly conditioned, to believe that skipping meals is dangerous, that hunger is an emergency, and that eating 3 times a day is as essential as breathing. But what if everything you were taught about how often to eat was built not on science, but on habit? What if the very discomfort you feel at the thought of skipping breakfast is not your body warning you of danger, but your mind resisting something unfamiliar? And what if hidden inside that discomfort is one of the most profound biological transformations the human body is capable of? This is not a fad diet story. This is not about losing a few pounds before summer. What we are about to explore goes far deeper than that. It touches the machinery of your cells, the ancient programming of your nervous system, the chemistry of your brain, and the very question of how long and how well the human body was designed to live. Because when you eat only once a day, something happens inside you that most people never experience. A sequence of events begins hour by hour that science is only now beginning to fully decode. And what researchers have found is both astonishing and humbling. The body, it turns out, is not the fragile thing we treat it as. It is extraordinarily capable, frighteningly intelligent, and in many ways, it thrives not in spite of hunger, but because of it. Let's start at the very beginning. The first hour without food feels like nothing unusual. Your body is still running on the fuel from your last meal. Blood sugar is stable, insulin is doing its job, and your cells are busy converting glucose into energy. Everything feels normal. But somewhere around the 2 to 3 hour mark, the first signals begin. Your stomach contracts. A hormone called ghrelin, the so-called hunger hormone, starts rising in your bloodstream. It travels up to the brain and knocks on the door of the hypothalamus, the region that governs appetite and survival instincts. And the message it carries is urgent. Food is needed. Find it. Now here is what most people do at this point. They eat. They silence the signal. And in doing so, they never find out what happens next. Because what happens next is remarkable. If you sit with that hunger, if you let it rise, and then rather than feeding it, simply observe it, something unexpected occurs. The ghrelin spike passes. The urgency fades, and your body, realizing that no food is coming, stops panicking and starts problem solving. A Ankiti Yusefa, a pure, the first great revelation of fasting. Hunger is not a crisis. It is a wave. It rises, it crests, and it falls. What feels like an unbearable emergency at the 3 hour mark has, by the 5th hour, quieted into something almost peaceful. This is not weakness leaving the body. This is the ancient machinery switching on. because your biology was not built for the modern world of refrigerators and drive-thrus and snacks available at every gas station. It was built for a world where food was uncertain, where meals were not scheduled, where some days brought abundance and many days brought nothing at all. Your ancestors did not eat breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, and dinner at 6. They ate when they could, and when they could not, their bodies adapted with breathtaking efficiency. That same efficiency lives inside you right now, dormant, waiting, patient. As the hours stretch on and your body accepts that no meal is coming, a metabolic shift begins that fundamentally changes how your cells produce energy. For most of the modern human's waking life, the body runs on glucose, sugar derived from food that floods the bloodstream after every meal. It is fast fuel, easy fuel, and the body reaches for it by default. But glucose has a problem. It runs out quickly. When you stop feeding yourself every few hours, the glucose supply dwindles and the body faces a choice. It can shut down or it can find another way. Evolution wisely chose the second option. The liver, which stores a limited supply of glucose in the form of glycogen, begins releasing those reserves to keep your blood sugar stable. This buys time. But within 6 to 8 hours, even those reserves start to thin. And that is when something ancient and extraordinary kicks in. Your body begins converting stored body fat into molecules called ketone bodies. These ketones travel through the bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier, and begin fueling your brain and muscles as efficiently as glucose, sometimes more so. This state is called ketosis, and it is not a medical emergency. It is a feature. It is the body's backup generator roaring to life. And it is one of the most elegant survival mechanisms in all of biology. What makes this transition so fascinating is not just that it works, but how it feels. Many people who fast for extended periods describe the ketogenic state not as weakness or deprivation, but as a kind of luminous clarity, the brain fog that many people experience after high-carbohydrate meals. That heavy, slow feeling in the early afternoon evaporates. Thoughts feel sharper. Focus deepens. There is a steadiness to the energy that is unlike the roller coaster of blood sugar spikes and crashes that defines most people's days. This is not placebo. This is chemistry. Ketones are a cleaner fuel source than glucose, producing fewer inflammatory byproducts and requiring less metabolic overhead to convert into energy. The brain does not just tolerate them. In many ways, it prefers them. But the metabolic shift is only one part of the story. While your body is busy rerouting its energy supply, another transformation is quietly unfolding at a hormonal level. Insulin, the hormone your pancreas releases every time you eat to help your cells absorb glucose, has been largely absent all day. And its absence is doing something profound. Because insulin is not just a signal to absorb sugar, it is also a signal to store fat. When insulin is high, your body is in storage mode. When insulin is low, your body is in repair mode. And for the vast majority of people eating 3 to 5 times a day, insulin is almost always elevated. The body never fully enters repair mode. It is always preparing for the next flood of incoming calories, always managing traffic, always storing and processing and storing some more. Eating once a day gives insulin a rest it rarely gets. Levels fall to their natural baseline, and the body, freed from the constant work of managing incoming food, turns its attention inward. Fat begins to move, inflammation begins to quiet, and something even more remarkable starts to happen at the cellular level. Around the 16 to 20 hour mark of fasting, a biological process activates that has become one of the most exciting areas of modern science. It is called autophagy, from the Greek words meaning self-eating. And while that sounds alarming, it is actually one of the most healing things your body can do. Autophagy is the cellular equivalent of deep cleaning. Throughout the normal course of living, your cells accumulate damaged proteins, dysfunctional organelles, and microscopic debris, the molecular equivalent of trash. Under normal eating conditions, the cell rarely has the energy or the signal to deal with this buildup. It is too busy processing incoming nutrients. But during extended fasting, when the external fuel supply is cut off and the cell must find resources from within, it begins breaking down this internal waste and recycling it into usable building blocks. The damaged is dismantled. The broken is repaired. The old is replaced with new. This discovery was so significant that Japanese cell biologist Yoshinori Ohsumi was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2016 for his work uncovering the mechanisms of autophagy. And what his research revealed, along with the thousands of studies that have followed, is that autophagy is not a side benefit of fasting. It is one of the primary reasons the body responds so powerfully to it. When autophagy is functioning well, it protects against cancer by clearing precancerous cells before they can proliferate. It protects against neurodegeneration by cleaning up the protein aggregates associated with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. It protects against metabolic disease by maintaining the integrity of your cell's energy-producing machinery. And when autophagy is suppressed, which it is in a body that never stops eating, the risks of all of these conditions rise significantly. The body needs downtime. It needs the biological equivalent of a night without customers, so it can mop the floors and restock the shelves. Eating once a day provides exactly that. And yet none of this would matter if the psychological dimension of fasting broke people before the physical benefits could arrive. Because the hardest part of eating only once a day is not the hunger. It is the confrontation with everything that hunger reveals. Most people in the modern world do not eat because they are hungry. They eat because they are bored, anxious, lonely, stressed, or simply because the clock says it is time. Food has become inseparable from comfort, from routine, from reward. Every meal carries an emotional weight beyond its nutritional one. And when you remove the meals, all of that weight has nowhere to go. It surfaces. It demands to be felt. And for many people, that confrontation is the real challenge. This is not a weakness. It is an invitation. Because what fasting ultimately teaches, if you let it, is the difference between true hunger and psychological hunger. True hunger is a quiet physical sensation that builds slowly and can wait. Psychological hunger is urgent, specific, and almost always tied to an emotion rather than a physiological need. When you fast long enough to encounter genuine hunger, perhaps for the first time in years, something clarifies. You begin to understand what your body actually needs as distinct from what your mind has learned to want. That distinction, once felt, is difficult to unfeel, and it changes not just how you eat, but how you relate to desire in general. Interestingly, the brain undergoes measurable structural changes in response to regular fasting. Levels of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, increase significantly during fasting states. BDNF is sometimes called miracle grow for the brain because of its role in stimulating the growth of new neurons, strengthening synaptic connections, and protecting existing brain cells from damage. Low BDNF levels are associated with depression, cognitive decline, and an increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases. Higher BDNF levels are associated with sharper memory, faster learning, greater emotional resilience, and a reduced risk of Alzheimer's. When you fast, you are not just changing your metabolism, you are literally remodeling your brain. The emotional steadiness that many long-term fasting practitioners describe is not merely psychological. It has a neurochemical basis. As ghrelin stabilizes over weeks of consistent fasting practice, the frantic urgency of early hunger fades. The dopamine spikes that the brain has learned to anticipate from frequent eating begin to quiet, and in their place, a more even baseline emerges. People who eat once a day regularly often describe a relationship with food that feels, for the first time, genuinely free, not obsessive, not frantic, not emotionally loaded, simply appreciative. The single meal they do eat becomes an experience of genuine pleasure rather than a compulsive habit. Flavor intensifies. Gratitude deepens. The act of eating, stripped of its frequency and its anxiety, becomes something close to sacred. There is also a temporal freedom that is difficult to anticipate until you experience it. The average person spends an enormous portion of their mental real estate thinking about food, what to eat next, whether they ate too much, whether they are eating the right things, when they will eat again. Food occupies the mind almost continuously. When you collapse all of that into a single daily decision, an unexpected spaciousness opens up. Hours that were once devoted to planning, preparing, eating, and recovering from meals become available for other things. Focus becomes easier to sustain. Creative work often deepens. The sheer bandwidth that is returned to you is something that is hard to appreciate until the constant background noise of meal-focused thinking goes quiet. And then there is the question that underlies all of this. Does eating less frequently actually help you live longer? The research, while not yet definitive in humans, due to the difficulty of conducting long-term studies, points consistently and powerfully in one direction. Animal studies conducted at the National Institute on Aging have shown that caloric restriction combined with intermittent fasting can extend lifespan in mice by up to 30%. More importantly, they extend health span, the period of life during which the animal is free from chronic disease and cognitive decline. In humans, the markers that predict longevity tell a similar story. Lower resting insulin levels, reduced chronic inflammation, higher autophagy activity, improved mitochondrial efficiency, and elevated BDNF are all associated with longer, healthier lives. And eating once a day in a growing body of research promotes all of them. This is Wes, not entirely new knowledge. Either, long before laboratory scientists had the tools to measure ketone bodies and autophagy rates, human civilizations were practicing fasting as a cornerstone of physical and spiritual life. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, prescribed fasting to his patients. The ancient Greeks fasted before intellectual endeavors, believing that an empty stomach sharpened the mind. Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic, and Christian traditions all incorporate fasting as a regular practice, not as punishment, but as a path to clarity, discipline, and renewal. Indigenous hunter-gatherer societies around the world ate in patterns that looked by modern standards like intermittent or extended fasting, not by choice but by necessity. And the cultures that maintained these practices often displayed remarkable longevity and physical robustness by the standards of their time. The science we are now assembling in the laboratory is in many ways a long overdue explanation for what people have known intuitively for thousands of years. But it would be dishonest to present eating once a day as a universal solution. And that honesty matters here. Because the body is not one thing, it is 7 billion slightly different things, each shaped by a unique combination of genetics, history, hormones, and circumstance. For some people, one meal a day is genuinely transformative. For others, it is inappropriate, potentially harmful, and should not be attempted without medical guidance. Women, particularly those of reproductive age, are more sensitive to caloric restriction than men because the female hormonal system is acutely tuned to signals of scarcity. Extended fasting can, in some women, disrupt the hypothalamic pituitary axis, leading to irregular cycles, changes in estrogen and progesterone levels, and effects that extend well beyond metabolism. This does not mean women cannot fast. Many do successfully and beneficially, but the approach requires more nuance and more attention to the body's signals. People with a history of disordered eating should approach fasting with particular care, because the control and restriction that fasting involves can, in some psychological contexts, reinforce unhealthy patterns rather than dissolve them. People managing diabetes, thyroid conditions, or adrenal dysfunction require medical supervision. Children and adolescents should not fast. These are not footnotes. They are essential boundaries. The danger with powerful tools is always the same. We find one that works, and we push it past the point where it helps into the territory where it harms. Fasting is not a religion. The body was designed for flexibility, for feast and famine in cycles, not for permanent deprivation. The goal of eating once a day is never to punish the body. It is to give it space to repair, to adapt, to return to rhythms older than agriculture itself. When it becomes obsessive, when it becomes a vehicle for control, rather than a practice of care, it has left its purpose behind. Done wisely, with awareness and attention, eating once a day is one of the most profound things you can offer your biology. Not because food is the enemy, but because rest is as necessary as nourishment. The body needs both. It needs the feast, and it needs the fast. It needs the abundance of a meal eaten slowly and with gratitude. And it needs the long, quiet hours in which no food arrives and the extraordinary machinery of cellular repair can do its work undisturbed. If your body could find a voice and speak to you at the end of a full day without food, it would not be asking you to stop. It would be telling you that for the first time in a long time, it finally had the chance to clean the rooms that never get cleaned, repair the things that have been waiting, and remember how to do what it has always known how to do. It would tell you that hunger is not a flaw in the design. It is the design, and that the stillness between meals is not emptiness. It is where the real work happens. You have spent your whole life feeding yourself. The question this science is quietly asking is whether you have ever given yourself the gift of not feeding, even just once, long enough to discover what lives on the other side of hunger. The answer, if you are willing to find it, might change the way you understand your own body for the rest of your life.